Good morning, and welcome to another Seize the Day. Today is Tuesday, July 26th, and I trust that you're waking up feeling really refreshed and ready to begin a new day. So grateful that we have these opportunities. I don't know about you, but where we are here in New Hampshire, yesterday we had some really big thunderstorms. Little unusual for life here in New Hampshire. You kind of expect big thunderstorms like that down in the south. Part of the fun of going down to the Carolinas is every afternoon, pretty much, these clouds would roll in and you'd get some really loud thunderstorms. And they would just like rock the house, and the rain would come down, and then 5 minutes later everything would be dried up. But yesterday it came down pretty hard, and we had some pretty big thunderstorms. So it was everything around us needed it. Water seemed to revive all the plants, and so we're grateful for that. As I said, I trust you're waking up feeling refreshed, ready to begin a new day. And we've been in a series now called Now What? And it's a series that is looking at the response to Jesus' claim of authority as the Son of God. He has been sharing in word and in action that he is the Messiah that God had promised. And so consequently, it's how people are responding to him now that takes up the theme of many of these passages now as we're going through this book of Matthew. One of the things I love about studying the scriptures is that it gives us an opportunity in this forum to begin to develop the ideas that are taking place through the scriptures, so that it's not just a word or a phrase that we pick up, but that we recognize that the Bible is really unveiling a story to us. And if we understand that story, then many of the passages that often can leave us feeling a little bit confused, they begin to make sense in the larger picture of what Jesus is sharing. So today, I'm looking at a passage, and this passage is found in Matthew chapter 12, and so I encourage everyone to turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 12, and we're going to take some look today at what Jesus has been sharing with us along the way. One of the things that I wanted you to be aware of is there is a passage here that is at the end of the Gospels, and I'm gonna pull up on our screen for you this text, and it's actually found in at the end of chapter 11, and it says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." If you have this text before you, you could see at the end of verse 28 and verse 29, there's a reference to rest. Jesus is saying that he is the one in whom we are to find rest. That he is the one who says, that he is calling all the weary and the burdened. And this is a word after Jesus kind of really confronts, those who have not been responding to his message and his miracles. He goes on to go to Old Testament precedent and tells everyone, saying, listen, if the miracles that were performed in you had been performed in Sodom and Gomorrah, for instance, right, or Tyre and Sidon, he goes, those people would have repented a long time ago. And the inference is that Jesus says someone greater is here. So what took place in the Old Testament was just a building, were building blocks leading to the coming of the Messiah, this great promise that God made that one day through this Messiah he would do a work and restore all things back as they had once, had been. paying the penalty for sin and reconciling the world back to God himself. Not only the humanity, but all of creation would be restored. It would not be under this judgment, right, of decay and destruction, death that's all around us. So Jesus now is coming and saying, I am that person. Matthew is making a case by giving us insight into the miracles, into the Old Testament passages that are being fulfilled right now. And so this text that we just finished looking at is this text that is reminding us again, right, that if we come to him, those who are weary and burdened, he says, I will give you rest. So this idea of rest is preeminent in the mind of Jesus. And so when it comes to rest, I suggested yesterday that one of the greatest places to look for this rest is where? It's found again in the idea of this Sabbath day. The Sabbath that God had promised that he would honor, right? And so what was that all about? Well, I took a passage here from Deuteronomy 5, and I'd like to put this up on the screen for you now. It says, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall do no work, right? Neither you, nor your son, daughter, manservant, maidservant, your ox, donkey, any of your animals, nor the alien within your gates, those who are non-Israelites, right? So that your manservant, maidservant may rest as you do. You notice that in this text, everyone is to find rest. The idea here is that no work is to be done. It's supposed to be a day of replenishment, a day where we align ourselves back to God's will and his purposes. Yes, it should be a time where we are reflecting upon God's call on our life, on the role that we're playing in this world, but it's also to give us not just a spiritual rest, but a physical rest. And so he says, this is to extend not only to the Israelites themselves, but to the people that work for them, for the non-Israelite that's in their camps, to the animals themselves. Now, what took place though is during the days of Jesus, this idea of work, it took on a whole different kind of meaning. Like now, all of a sudden, they began to make these long lists of what qualified as work and what didn't qualify as work. And come on, you and I both know the heart of man can be so deceptive. And so we think that we're really honoring God in these ways, only to really realize that we just made up a bunch of rules for ourselves. And the heart of what this was really meant to be is totally something different. So in a couple of days, after we go through the majority of this passage, what I'd like to do is just sit down and go through what the Sabbath is really supposed to be about. And we're going to do that on Sunday. I mean on this coming Friday. All right. So Friday will be a day that we're going to really take apart this whole idea of Sabbath. What you need to know for our discussions today is that the idea of not doing any work being the operative word in this command, right? Yeah, that was being interpreted in a very, very severe way by the religious leaders of the day, the teachers of the law, the Pharisees, and so that you couldn't light a candle, because that was considered work. You could only walk certain distances because that would be considered work. I mean, they got down into such minutia that after a while, it became a burden. And think about it. We turn this Sabbath day into a burden when God meant it to be a day where people found rest, replenishment, a realignment with them. It was supposed to be a time of great refreshment. It's kind of like when you think about vacation or the days off that you have at the end of a week, right? So it's like, oh man, finally we got here. TGIF, thank God it's Friday. Right, exactly. This was God's way of giving you a TGIF. It's saying, look, on this day, you should just be, really just stepping back from everything that is causing you to feel that sense of weariness and burden. And so consequently, they made it something totally, entirely different. And as a result, it really did hurt the people around them, didn't it? It was not good. So where we go from there is what I want you to see what Jesus then was talking about here. And I'm just going to read this text for you rather quickly, okay? It says, at that time, Jesus went throughout the grain fields on the Sabbath. So see, the Sabbath is brought in right after Jesus just been saying, I have come to give you rest. Take my yoke on you, right? Learn of me. You shall find rest for your souls. So this idea of rest now is picked up in the stories of Matthew 12. So now we're having these Sabbath stories, but notice what's happening here. His disciples were hungry, began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. To the Pharisees, that was work. You're not allowed to do that. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to Jesus, says, look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath. Who said that was unlawful? It was the Pharisees that said it was unlawful. God just said you shouldn't do any work. He didn't mean for you picking up some grain and having a snack is considered work. But in their stringent interpretation of these laws, that's exactly what took place. Let's continue to read, though. Jesus answered, he says, haven't you read? And then he gives them two examples. One of King David. When David did what was not lawful, he ate the consecrated bread in the temple. Or he says, how about the priests? They work on the Sabbath day, and yet they're innocent. So Jesus is bringing in all of these exceptions, and then notice what he goes on to say. He says, I tell you that one greater than the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And so Jesus now is saying, you guys have been interpreting what the Sabbath is all about. But I'm here to tell you that I'm the one that's interpreting what this Sabbath is all about. I'm the one who is bringing definition to this. And what you have turned it into is so far removed from what my Father really desired. And if that was not enough, then Jesus goes on and he gives you another Sabbath story. And here this is found in Matthew 12, 9 through 14. He says, from going on from that place, he went into their synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. They asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? It seems like an innocent enough question, but you notice the text here in verse 10, here it says, they're looking for a reason to what? To accuse Jesus. This has really nothing to do with any compassion whatsoever for the man with the shriveled hand, right? This has nothing to do with whether or not you can alleviate the suffering of this man. Now the keeping of the Sabbath has become such a priority over really helping your fellow man. How did that get so turned around? So think about it. Even in our own day, we could be so caught up in pursuing the structure of our faith that we neglect the weightier things like justice and mercy and compassion. But no, this is all about us keeping this, the rules. Like we've set this up. So for what reason? So that we can think maybe that we're justifying ourselves before God. We're trying to make ourselves look better. What we're going to discover, and the Jews of old should have discovered, that God does not delight in the blood of bulls and goats, right? It wasn't, the sacrificial system was just a reminder of the penalty of sin, and that God is the one who justifies, a man on his own would never be able to justify himself. So all this rule making is for us, not for God. And the consequence of that is that that it just pulls us away. It makes us think that we're earning our way into heaven. Or if I'm a good person, then I should get in. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with whether or not God's standards of righteousness have been met. That's why, think again when you read in texts like Romans chapter 8 or Romans chapter 3, where it says that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Like, everybody has sinned. Nobody can stand before God and say, I'm earning my way in. No, we're saved by grace, not of works. And so this idea of all this rule keeping, boy, it was so misguided. And so now, instead of looking for the healing that Jesus is offering, they're looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. And so they ask, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? And notice how Jesus is going to respond. Jesus responds by saying to them, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable is a man than a sheep? Therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. See what Jesus is doing here? Jesus is elevating the weightier things of what God really desires from us. And that is to not only love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, so that his call on your life to keep the Sabbath is something that weighs on you, and you begin to recognize, okay, God has given me instruction, and I need to find a way to incorporate that into my everyday life. But it's not just about your vertical relationship with God, it's also about your horizontal relationship with all of humanity. You're supposed to love your brother as yourself. You're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. And so here Jesus is saying to them, hey, what's more valuable, a man or a sheep? And you know, if your sheep fell into the thing, you'd say, well, that's valuable, so I'm going to go after it. But this guy with a shriveled hand, he doesn't deserve that same kind of consideration? Jesus says, of course it's lawful to do what's good on the Sabbath. You're not breaking the Sabbath because you decide to help someone. You see how twisted this gets? So that I'm not going to help you. Why? Because I am keeping the Sabbath day. So your rule keeping is more important than the compassion that you're going to show to your neighbor. Yeah, see, you'll find later on Jesus is going to come on really strong in these areas and just point out other inconsistencies that the Pharisees were all about. But let's go on, because Jesus has something more to say, because after he says that to them, he says, then he said to the man, stretch out your hand. So he stretched it out, and it was completely restored, just as sound as the other. You would think everybody would be rejoicing. But instead, notice it says the Pharisees went out and plotted how they might kill Jesus. Did you catch that? The Pharisees are out there now plotting how they might kill Jesus. The response to a miracle, the response to seeing someone restored, given the use of both hands. I mean, if you've ever broken a hand and had it in a cast for a long time, boy, you realize how debilitating that can be. I broke my wrist many years ago playing football, and it was in a cast for quite some time. I'm telling you, it was difficult to comb your hair, to eat, to shower. You don't realize all the ways. Just, stub your toe and realize how hard it is then to get around the rest of your day. But of course, so here's this guy, his hand is healed. Everybody should be rejoicing. We should look into Jesus now and saying, what does all of this mean? But instead, notice what the Pharisees are doing. They are out there they're plotting on how they might kill Jesus. Why? Think about that for a second with me. Why would they be all about killing Jesus? Because everywhere you're turning now, Jesus is supplanting their authority. Every time you look, Jesus is the one who is giving new instruction. Everywhere they look, Jesus is the one now who is demonstrating real power, bringing healing and restoration to people, not only casting out evil spirits, healing diseases, but restoring sight, giving people, who are paralyzed the ability to walk. I mean, things that only God can do. And that's the point here. God is doing it. He's doing it through his Son that he sent, Jesus, the Messiah. He's the promised one. Here's all the evidence before you. Don't you remember just a few chapters ago, we were reading about John the Baptist, who was beginning to wonder if Jesus really was this one. I mean, John at that point was in prison, right? He realized what was going on, around him. And what did Jesus say to reassure him? He told his disciples, John's disciples, he says, look, you go back and tell John what you see and what you hear. The blind receive their sight. The lepers are cleansed. The dead are raised. The demons are cast out. All of these things to demonstrate that the one who has come has the power that only God himself would wield. And that's now being repaid by the Pharisees, who find Jesus to be an affront to their authority. That's why you see these passages that we're looking at in chapter 12, it's all about authority. It's all about these accusations that people are bringing against Jesus. And there's something else here that I brought last week, but I want to bring to you today, because these are very interesting passages on understanding the progression of where we are right now in this story in Matthew. So, for instance, I want you to just look at this passage in Matthew 8:34. It says, going all the way back, you remember the story when Jesus cast the demons of these two men living in a town called Gadara, and he cast all those spirits into the pigs, right? And those pigs run down into the sea, and they're destroyed. Well, the whole town comes out to meet Jesus. They all knew about these men that were tormenting the region. People would avoid them at all costs. I mentioned, imagine living in a neighborhood where there were a couple of individuals that were making life miserable for everyone. How pleased would everyone be if they were removed, if that evil came to a halt? Well, that's what Jesus did. But when they see Jesus, they're more concerned with the pigs than they are with what Jesus has done. And notice they plead with him to leave. This is not the response that you think people would have. There were some, the individuals themselves who were healed, they come back, they want to follow Jesus. Jesus says, no, go back and share with everyone what has happened here. Tell them about me. And here, so you see, like, there is this response factor. That's why this whole series, Now What? Well, look again. Here in 9:3, it says this is the story where Jesus heals a paralytic. He heals the paralytic, and before he does, he says, your sins are forgiven. And notice the teachers of the law said, this man, he's blaspheming. Right? He's speaking out against the things of God. To blaspheme meant like to assault God, to say things about God that just are not true, like taking on the authority that belongs only to God. And it was a great offense. But Jesus, Jesus heals this man, and they're still like, they're not seeing the healing, right? They just have it in their head. He cannot be who he says he is. Therefore, he's blaspheming. They're not open. Then again, in verse 11, Jesus starts to reach out to the tax collectors, the sinners. In fact, he calls Matthew as one of his 12. And what do the Pharisees say there? They say, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? In other words, you shouldn't be eating with them. You shouldn't be calling them into your service. They're not like us. They're not holy like us. They're not righteous like we are. You see how this sense of judgment now has everything to do with performance in the way in which the Pharisees now are determining what that is to look like. And there is this constant, rebuke against Jesus. But notice how it gets even, more and more intense. Jesus goes and he raises Jairus' daughter from the dead. When he tells them that the girl is not dead but asleep, notice here, they laugh at him. But who was laughing when that little girl came out of that house and she was very much alive? Again, as we just said, they're not just talking to Jesus' disciples. They're not just smirking on the side. Now they are confronting Jesus personally, and they're telling him what he's doing is wrong. And not only that, they're finding reasons now to accuse Jesus in verse 10. And then when you get to verse 14, now they're trying to plot to kill him. You see, this is why what I'm sharing with you is that this passage that we're looking at in chapter 12 needs to be seen through this lens, right, of what of the challenge to Jesus' authority. That's what chapter 12 is all about. It's about it's about them challenging the authority of Jesus. And how Jesus responds to that, we saw now in this. I made up a slide here that the accusation against Jesus was that he was a lawbreaker in the Sabbath. And how does Jesus answer that? By saying, I am the Lord of the Sabbath, right? I'm the one, who is going to define what the Sabbath is really all about. And then consequently, after which we're told another story, and this story is all about Jesus healing a man possessed by a demon. And when Jesus heals this man, right? Because this is all about an exorcism that took place in verses 20 through 37. And it says Jesus, they're claiming that Jesus is an agent of Satan, because they're saying the power that Jesus was utilizing had come from the devil himself, and so they were using that against Jesus. But there's one more accusation in our text that I want you to see, and it comes back again to his authority, because they claim that Jesus is self-appointed, that he's a teacher with no proper authorization. And so you see in this chapter 12, what I'm trying to give you a little better insight in here is that all these stories, the main point of each one of these stories is to just underscore that Jesus actually does have authority. He is the Lord of the Sabbath. He is doing what he's doing by the Spirit, the Holy Spirit that is in him. And that the authority that he has is the authority that God himself has given to him. And when they ask him for a sign, oh man, that is a very interesting response. And we'll take a little bit of a look at that tomorrow when we look at Jesus' response to them wanting one more sign. My friends, as we spent this time together, what I hope you begin to realize as we're going through this Gospel of Matthew is that Jesus is doing the things that he's doing so that you and I would gain greater confidence and assurance that he is the Messiah that was promised. All of these stories, it's meant to just underscore that Jesus has come to fulfill everything that was said that he would do. And so consequently, we're to find a great deal of rest in not only Jesus' teaching, but also in his power. That rest for the soul that is weary and burdened. And we recognize that, no, that God is for me. And if he is for me, then who could be against me? Then we recognize that even in the midst of all of these challenges, in the midst of our own weakness, his strength will be made sufficient. That's why we go out there and we face the days, because we have a confidence that the one who has revealed himself in the person of Jesus of Nazareth, this Messiah, he's able to do exceeding abundant on my behalf. He says, put on my yoke. It's easy, it's light. You're going to find rest for your soul. And for those who are not, they're in constant conflict with Jesus. And now we see it's reached to a certain height where now they're just plotting on how they could remove him. And it hasn't changed, generation after generation. People are still trying to put Jesus on the margins, but he's Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And if what he says is true, when he comes back, all things are going to be restored. And the unfortunate things is the opportunities that people have had to come to know him will be no longer. And in its wake, instead of an invitation to enjoy this rest, there will be judgment. That's a sober word, and one that we need to consider as we continue to live out this life of faith. So God bless you. Thank you so much for being a part of today's broadcast. I hope that your faith becomes increasingly more and more confident. It will bring a sense of peace into your life. So go out, seize the day, knowing that God is good all the time. And for those of you who are near the Bethany family here, on Sunday we're having a family reunion. If you've been a part of Bethany, you'd love to come. This is going to be a great opportunity. We're going to have one service on Sunday at 9 o'clock, and we're going to have food outside. We're going to have all kinds of games for the kids. It's just going to be a family reunion. So if you've been a part of Bethany, haven't been back for a while, then come on Sunday. It's going to be a great, great time. My friends, Lord willing, we'll spend some more time again tomorrow. Till then, remember, God is good all the time.